Hello, this is Michael from League of Items, and today I want to go over the AP items, specifically the ones that are going to impact mid lane and mid lane champions and mid lane players. Patch 8.4 was just announced. We have all the information now. Not all the information. We have a lot more information now. And I want to take you through my spreadsheet, and I'm going to try to construct a tier list based on just the items alone. Because one of the things about my philosophy, my theory about the game with League of Items is that the items help determine which champions are the best at any point in time. So after looking at this, after looking at the items by themselves without champions, we'll get a tier list that says which items should theoretically be the best, and then we can start thinking about which champions will use the best items the best. So first, Archangel Staff. Archangel Staff was changed. Now it's 50 AP, 20 CDR, 650 mana. And this is just coming from the base stats when you purchase the item. Okay, so it's important to differentiate that because the ceiling of this item is super high. It's a very good item. It's been a very good item, and this was overall a buff. Even though you lose the 30 AP, there are a couple different mechanisms within Seraph's Embrace that I'll touch on later that mean this item is going to be very good. And now that everything's changing, maybe more players will finally see how strong Seraphs can be. But overall, Archangel Staff, good item, some good changes, and again, the ceiling of this item is tied in to Seraph's Embrace. Next up, Banshee's Veil. Banshee's Veil was not changed in this patch. You get 70 ability power, 10% CDR, 60 magic resistance. And as you can see, this is the primary magic resist item. If you also want to build AP at the same time, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Everybody knows that already. The value of this item, it costs 3,000 gold, and you get 95% returned in base stats immediately, and the special is Spell Shield. So most of the time, Spell Shield needs to be worth like 150 gold in order for the item to be efficient. But since Spell Shield can be taken away by ambient damage, it's tough to get max value out of it. A lot of the time, it's going to be a random ability that takes away your Spell Shield. And that's a problem that Riot should probably fix in the future. My one idea for this is instead of having the shield on your champion go away immediately, it would change the icon of the item in your inventory. So when you're hit by an item, you can glance down. When you're hit by an ability or a spell, you can glance down, see what hit you, and you could press your button within a certain amount of time, and it'll completely negate that damage. And I know it'd be a very tough thing to do, but I think it'd be an interesting interaction, and it would help the item a lot. And I think if they did this, they would probably be able to take away some of the magic resist or some of the AP, because right now you're basically building this item for the MR and the AP, not for the Spell Shield. But the Spell Shield is something interesting that could be designed a little better. Next up, Hextech GLP 800. This was not changed. This was changed in the patch. Okay, so I'm going to change that. Hextech GLP. So with Hextech GLP, the one main thing that they did, which kind of was bizarre to me, I didn't really like the change, is that they got rid of Eternity. I think Eternity is interesting because it's different than most items. And, I mean, now Rod of Ages is the only item that has it. So if you want Eternity, you have to go Rod of Ages. This is going to negatively impact Aurelion Soul specifically, I think, because there was also a change to Icy Bolts. And I'm not... The Icy Bolt change was just that. It was a change. It's not necessarily a buff or a nerf. It's just the way that the item performs is slightly different now. And then there was also CDR added. So I'm going to bring up the wiki page. I always use this website. This is a great website. So now we have the haste, 10% additional CDR. So this means when you build this item, you're getting 20% CDR. But if you build multiple items with the haste passive, you're only going to get 10%. So let's say you build 2 items with haste, you only get haste once. Okay, I think that's enough of that. Hextech Protobelt, not changed. Cost 2,500 gold, 60 AP, 10% CDR, 300 health. And all the health items with AP, you can see they give you 500 or 300 because I can read. Rod of Ages gives more once it's scaled up, but as a base value, they all give 300. And this is 2,500 gold, 95% efficient. The ceiling is really tough to quantify because the way that Protobelt works. I mean, I think we're all familiar with Protobelt. The dash, how do you quantify a dash? How do you quantify the damage? Because it's really difficult quantifying damage itself. What you can really do is compare it to other passives and actives and see which one is better. But that's not going to give you it's not going to give you a number that you can kind of compare to other things. Protobelt's a good item, though, and I think we can all agree that the value of this item is really closer to 100% because it's a reusable active and it opens up new possibilities for different champion kits. Next up, Liandry's Torment. Initially, when I went over this item, I was not happy with how they changed it, but it's actually a huge buff. The flat magic pen is gone, and they changed it from current health to max health. So this means that you're going to be able to shred tanks much more easily. When you look at it, the 3,100 cost, you only get 82% of value back. So in order for this item to be a good investment, the passives Madness and Torment need to be really good. So let's just look at that real quick. Madness, deal 2% increased damage for each second in combat with champions, specifically champions. So this means that you need to be in combat with a champion, not with minions. Up to a 10% max. And I think that's going to be amazing for extended team fights, but as I mentioned in another video, I'm not sure how long the average skirmish lasts in lane to get value out of this part specifically. But between Madness and Torment, the value of this item is definitely over 100%, especially as the game goes into the late game, where you're doing a lot of damage from Torment. Dealing spell damage applies a damage over time effect that deals bonus magic damage equal to 1% of target's max health per second for 3 seconds. So it should do 3% of the target's max health over the 3-second period. And this damage is doubled against movement impaired units, which most of the champions who build this have a way to proc that. So that's 6%. So that's 6% of a target's max health, including the other damage that you're doing to them. It's very good. It's a very good item. And I could easily see this becoming broken and them having to revert it or change it again. Next up, Lich Bane. Lich Bane's a very, very interesting item. It's the only AP item with Spellblade. For 3,200 gold, you get the 82% value in base stats, and that's spread over 80 ability power, 10% CDR, 250 mana, and 7% move speed. The problem with Lich Bane isn't that it's a bad item, because it's not a bad item. It really comes down to which champions can build it. It's an underappreciated item because it requires you to play differently. It requires you to use an ability, auto attack, use an ability, auto attack, use an ability, auto attack, and weave those things in, and it's more difficult for players who aren't very good. So it's a high skill cap item. Next up, Luden's Echo. Luden's Echo was actually changed quite significantly. They took away the move speed and replaced it with mana and some CDR. And I've never liked Luden's Echo personally. They took away 10 AP too. But just from a numbers perspective, it does make sense. I just think it gets outclassed by other items. So Luden's Echo, 97% efficient with the change. So that means that Echo needs to be worth a couple hundred gold, which it probably is. It's just, it's not very, you can't really plan around it. It seems pretty random in team fights, and personally, I don't like randomness in my team fights. I want to be able to predict as much as possible about a team fight before I go into it. So gain charges upon moving or casting at 100 charges. The next instance of ability damage you deal will expend all charges to deal 100 plus a ratio. So it does deal a decent amount of damage. It's just how reliable is that damage? And from what I've seen, it's not very reliable. You're building it. You used to build this item because it gave you the 100 AP, and a lot of champions would just want the AP. You get the maximum amount of AP out of that item slot. Next up, Morellonomicon also went through a lot of changes. So Morellonomicon was arguably the best AP item for the past, I don't know, year and a half, 2 years, ever since they changed it originally. You can see it's 100% efficient. You get 80 AP, 300 health, 15 magic pen, and grievous wounds. So what they did is they took away the magic pen from the Liandry's line and they shifted it, putting it on Morellonomicon. Morellonomicon lost mana, lost the mana restoration after a takedown, and now instead of only applying grievous wounds to champions under 35% health, it applies it at all times. And I think this is a very good change. This is a great change from a design perspective, because there were so many situations where you would have these gigantic tanks that you need to put grievous wounds on, but you couldn't get them down to the 35% threshold. So that meant that the AD carry really, really, really needed Mortal Reminder, and that was just stupid. I think that was a big mistake that they had the threshold on Morellonomicon, and I'm not sure why that is. Maybe back when it functioned differently, it was broken or something. But I think Morellonomicon is going to be able to be built on less champions because it doesn't include mana anymore. So maybe it's not an item that everyone can rush as a first item. It's probably not, because a lot of champions need mana or a way to restore mana. But I think the item itself is still very strong. It just might be used less and built less as a first item because of the changes. And I think that's an important distinction to make. Next up, Nashor's Tooth, one of my favorites. For 3,000 gold, you get 140% worth of base stats, 80 AP, 20% CDR, 50% attack speed. And you also get the scaling on hit damage from the passive. This is another example of an item that the community might think it's not very good because they focus on the attack speed portion of it, when in reality, without the attack speed, the item is still right around 100% efficient. Just think about that for a second. Some of these items over here, you need to use the passives efficiently to get back to 100%. You could use attack speed extremely inefficiently, and you would still have an item that's worth 100% because of its other stats. And the stats are so strong. I mean, 80 AP, just look at all these numbers on here. It's right in line with most items. The 20% CDR, it's better than most items because it's not tied into the 20%, the 10% of haste. So this is a 20% CDR item without haste, and that's very valuable. So if you're playing a champion that needs ability power and CDR and can take advantage of the attack speed in any amount, you're going to get an item that's over 100% efficient. And the scaling on hit is just a bonus. So the attack speed and the scaling on hit are really just bonuses that if you become a better player and learn how to use Nashor's Tooth more efficiently, it's just a great item. And Azir is obviously the main champion who uses it very well, but it's just really an underappreciated item. And I think if there were more champions that could take advantage of the stats, it would get nerfed. So that's unfortunate. But the ceiling of the item is huge, around 200%, close to 6,000 gold. Next up, Deathcap. The Deathcap change was very surprising because I feel like Deathcap, everyone already understood what Deathcap did and appreciated Deathcap and knew how good of an item it was. Now you're getting more ability power. Now you're getting more ability power out of the passive. It's going from 35% to 40%. And that's a decent chunk. The 5% is pretty good. I mean, if you threw 5% onto some of these other items, they'd become much better items. So Deathcap, if you don't buy it as a first item because it's under 100% efficient, and it just scales and gets better, so it's better as a second or third item. But Deathcap, it had its cost reduced by 100. You're getting even more out of the passive. And the one way they actually did try to compensate for that is by changing the build path. So now it's 2 needlessly large rods and 1,100 combined cost, which maybe that's just a really difficult thing for people to accomplish consistently in lane, but still a very good item. It probably does feel pretty bad having 2 needlessly large rods just sitting in your inventory, but I think it's worth it. The payoff is worth it. Rod of Ages. Rod of Ages. Ever since they changed Rod of Ages to bring the base stats when you purchase it in line with other items, it's been a super good item, and a lot of players just don't use it because they have negative connotations about Rod of Ages from way back when. So for 2,700 gold, which is a great price, 93% efficient when you buy it. So right when you buy this item, it's 93% efficient. That means you're getting almost all of the value out of your money. And then it starts scaling right away, and it has a maximum efficiency of 150% once you get the full stacks. And when it's fully stacked, you get 100 ability power. So just look at this list. You have 2 items that give more ability power than Rod of Ages. And sure, you have to let it scale a little bit, but as long as you survive the landing phase and don't feed, it's going to outscale most of the other items people pick in terms of ability power alone. You don't get CDR from this item, which is one reason it's not very popular outside of the core champions that build it, but it's a very strong item. When it's fully stacked, you get 500 health and 400 mana, and that's when you get to 150%. It's just a very good item. People are too focused on, is this item built for my champion kind of thing, where Rod of Ages makes sense on many more champions than people think. Next up, Rylai's Crystal Scepter. Rylai's was changed. It was given 10 more AP, which pushes it over the 100% threshold, which is, it's not the most important thing in the world, but it just looks good and feels good as an item, because at one point, like Morellonomicon into Rylai's were just way too good, and once they nerfed Rylai's, everyone stopped building it basically. But now that they give it a 10 AP increase again, people are going to start trying it again, and they'll realize how good it is still. And I think that's the truth. I think it is a very good item still. But Rylai's is good. I think you'll see it a lot more in your games. Seraph's Embrace. Okay, now let's talk about Seraph's Embrace. This item is ridiculous. Once you stack Archangel's Staff, it transforms into Seraph's Embrace, and Seraph's Embrace is one of the best items in the game. 3,200 gold is the initial investment from Archangel's Staff, but there's not an additional cost when it transforms. Right when it transforms, it's 140% efficient. Now, you do have to spend a little bit of time and effort getting to the point where Seraph's is active, but once you build Archangel's Staff, every time you expend mana, you get plus 8 mana. So it goes by much quicker than you think. I think that was kind of an overlooked portion of the item for a while, because they changed that at one point. The ceiling of this item is gigantic at 180%, which is one of the reasons they had to strip away 30 AP from this, because if they had Seraph's Embrace as an 80 AP item to start, it would just be way too good, and I think people would catch on eventually. This is another haste item, so 10% of this does come from haste, so it doesn't stack with other haste items. The 1,400 mana is great, and people get caught up on the mana. They think, I don't need that much mana, that's a waste. But would you rather have the excess mana or run out of mana? Like, it can only help you. It never hurts you to have extra mana. And the way that the active works incentivizes having extra mana. So I think eventually people will get past that. So let's just look at this more closely. The unique is Awe. Grants bonus ability power equal to 3% of your maximum mana, and refunds 25% of the mana you spend. And this is also on Archangel Staff, so it doesn't need to transform to get to this point. So that means it's good even on Archangel Staff. Now, the one thing that does change is Mana Shield. Mana Shield drains 20% of your current mana to shield yourself for an equal amount plus 150 for 3 seconds. Okay, so this is the thing that I don't understand. Seraph's Embrace, compared to Zhonya's or Banshee's Veil, Seraph's Embrace is just better. The active is just better. Instead of being in a period of stasis, you can be active and aggressive when you have Seraph's Embrace. If you know that you're about to go crazy aggressive onto the enemy team, pop Seraph's Embrace and go aggro. It's just something that's not utilized at all, and it's so good. You can still move around, and you have this gigantic shield. And I ran the numbers on it. for awe and the shield itself. So the champion with the highest max mana is Kassadin. Seraph's Embrace gives a minimum of 23 to 46 AP based on level from the passive because of champion base stats at level 18. So every champion who is even slightly interested in building this item, in a worst case scenario, they get 23 AP from awe. This is worth between 500 to 1,000 gold. And on Kassadin, it means that the item will give 76 to 156 AP for Kassadin, which equals 5,400 gold before the mana refund, which is somewhat useful, and before the shield active. So if we push this one step further, Kassadin at level 18, the shield would be a maximum of 500 and a minimum of 100. A 500 shield at max. Like you're obviously not going to get a 500 shield exactly because just the way that team fights work. I think we all understand that. But the shield is essentially effective health. And this means that if 1 point of health is worth 2.67 gold, which that's just the number, the shield would be a minimum of 267 gold and a maximum of 1,335 gold. This means that the total value of Seraph's Embrace can fluctuate between 5,000 and 6,000 gold. Like you can spend 3,200 gold, and at some points in the game, that item is going to be worth close to 6,000 gold. That's just crazy. It's so efficient. It's so great. It's a great item. It's such a great item, and no one really uses it outside of Rise players. But the applications go so much further than that. There are so many champions that could use this efficiently. They just don't because they'd rather build something else. And it would require you to change your playstyle, but I think it's just a missed opportunity at this point because this item was even better before the change. So if players think that Seraph's Embrace is good now, then hopefully they realize how much they messed up by not using it in previous patches because it's been broken for a long time. All right, next up, we have one of the new items, Spellbinder. And this item is ridiculous in terms of how good it can be. And it doesn't have mana, which is great. Because if this had mana on it, then a lot of players would just build it first on everyone because of the active. So I'll get to that point. So for 2,800 gold, it's 92% efficient. And the ceiling is close to 160%, which is surprising because you look at the stats and it doesn't seem that incredible, but once you read the active, you're going to understand. So you get 100 AP, that's the second most AP out of any item, and you get the 10% move speed. So they took the 10% move speed away from Luden's Echo and threw it onto Spellbinder. So Spellbinder, like I said, it's only 92% efficient without the passive and active. The passive, gain a charge each time a nearby enemy or allied champion, including yourself, uses an ability up to a maximum of 100 charges. Now, if it were required to have 100 charges in order to use Spellburst, that would be pretty good because it's going to prevent so how long is this going to take to charge? And I think that it wouldn't take that long, especially if you take this into consideration while you're picking champions. If I know that I want to use something like Spellbinder, then I'm going to pick a champion that can spam abilities. And I'm going to put this onto a team that has multiple champions that can spam abilities. And it's even better against champions that can spam abilities. So if you're in a game, and if you're in Champ Select, and you know that the enemy team has a bunch of 80 casters and mages that just want to machine gun spells, if you build Spellbinder, it's going to charge up very fast. And yes, you can only use Spellburst once every 60 seconds, but it's just such a good active. Spellburst grants 1 to 100 ability power for 4 seconds. So right when you buy this item, if you get the charges, you can run up to someone, turn this on, and you have 100 more ability power. It's just crazy. And then you also receive, as if the ability power were not enough, you gain 0.3 to 30% bonus move speed that decays over 2 seconds. And the crazy thing about this item is you don't need to be at 100 charges. And that's such an interesting thing for them to do. I think Riot did a great job with this item because it's an interesting decision a lot of the time to use Spellbinder. Like, this can save your life. This could literally save your life. If you're in a game and you're about to get ganked and you know that you have enough charges stacked up to where you just press this button and you run away faster, that's great. That's so good. The utility on this item is something that is not going to show up in the numbers when you're doing gold evaluation and stuff like that, but the different uses are just so cool. It's a great idea. It's a great designed item. I'm really looking forward to using this and seeing what I can do with it because I think it's a very good item. The ceiling that I mentioned here is the addition of 100 AP and 30% movement speed. For 4 seconds, when you use that active, the item is going to be worth 160% of the 2,800 gold that you have to spend for it, which is really good. Twin Shadows. This is mostly a support item, maybe a jungle item. I really hope that doesn't come back because there were champions building this, like Evelyn and stuff, just to make their ganks a little easier before it was removed. For 2,400 gold, 77% efficient. You're not going to see this on most mid laners because it's just not worth it. There are better items out there for mid laners. So I think this is going to stick with supports and maybe junglers. 60 AP, 10% CDR, 7% move speed, and the spooky ghosts are back. I loved them on Frost Queen's Claim because you got them for free. Now, you basically need the spooky ghosts to be worth closest to 500, 600 gold, which is not great. I think that's going to make it much less appetizing to sink money into Twin Shadows just for that. Void Staff. Void Staff is another item that they needed to change this patch because if they didn't, things were going to get out of control, especially with Spellbinder. So I think something like Spellbinder, Rabadon's Void Staff with any other item, like as a fourth item, is going to be absurd. Because when you activate Spellbinder in combination with Void Staff, you just have so much AP that the removal of AP just isn't going to matter off of Void Staff. This is going to be something to unleash the rest of your kit and the other items that you have. It's not necessarily about this item. It's about how this item synergizes with other items. And that's reflected in the value being only 57% initially when you buy it. But overall, I mean, when you get to the late points in the game and there are champions with a lot of MR, it becomes a necessity. So I think that's enough on that. Zhonya's the only AP item with armor. And I'm surprised that Zhonya's didn't get more popular with the commencing stopwatch situation that we had where everyone was building it. Nobody took that into consideration. Like the stopwatch itself was so valuable that everyone wanted it, but no one picked band around it. You know, where, oh well, this champion goes like Fiddlesticks works really well with his Zhonyas. Maybe I should play Fiddlesticks. Oh, Annie works really well with his Zhonyas. Maybe I should play her. Morgana, Rumble. These champions that always needed his Zhonyas didn't really come back into the meta, which I was kind of surprised. I thought that was going to happen for sure. For 2,900 gold, 92% efficient, you get 70 AP, 10% CDR, and the 45 armor. And the special is the Zhonya's Hourglass thing, the stasis that you put yourself into. And the general consensus is that if Zhonya's prevents one death, you got your value out of your item, which is pretty cool. And the same thing can be said for commencing stopwatch, which is why it was so good and had to be nerfed twice. Now it's like a 10-minute. You can't use it until the 10-minute mark. So now let's go into the tier list. Actually, before we do that, so let's just look at some things here. So if we sort it by cost, you see that Twin Shadows is at the bottom, but look at how the cost and value correlation. There isn't really a correlation there. Most of these items are between 95 to 105%. Just in general, that's how Riot builds their items, depending on what actives and stuff are thrown into it. But personally, the items that I'm the most interested in are the ones with the huge ceilings. So let's go to value. Look at the base stats real quick. Seraph's Embrace, Nashor's Tooth, Morellonomicon. These items, without any other without their actives and passives, they're just so good immediately because of the base stats that are on them. And again, this isn't really taken into consideration by most people in pick ban, or like when they think about which champions they think are the best. But if we're looking at this just from an items perspective, I would say Seraph's Embrace and Nashor's Tooth are definitely two of the best items in the game. So just as a first pass, I think that this is somewhat uncontroversial. I don't think most people would disagree with this. I think Banshee's Veil, too much of the value is located in MR and the Spell Shield, and the Spell Shield's useless for the most part. Personally, I just see that between from a theoretical perspective and a practical perspective, I really just don't think that the ceiling is there when it's compared to other items. So I think Banshee's Veil's on the bottom. Hextech GLP, I think it's still at the bottom even after the changes because most players aren't going to build it. So in theory and in practice, what you're going to see in terms of popularity, I don't think it's going to be up at the top. Protobelt, I think Protobelt is at the bottom too. And it's tough with Protobelt because it's a unique item in the sense that it only costs 2,500 gold. And that alone means that more champions should be building it, especially if they're behind, because when you create a finished item, you convert a lot of the potential gold into real gold because the component items are generally not very efficient themselves. Zhonya's Hourglass, no matter what they do, Zhonya's just is never as popular as I think it probably should be. But with the commencing stopwatch change and everything, I think the fact that you can get the Zhonya's active without having to build a Zhonya's has kind of negated the use of this item unless you're up against a heavy AD team. And then last up, Rylai's. Rylai's, I could see it on the bottom level or on the one above it because I think with a little bit more AP, I think players are going to start using it again and realize how good the slow is, especially on champions who are building Liandry's. But if you see a rise in popularity of Rylai's, it probably has a lot to do with Liandry's being very good. Next up, the middle tier. These are items that I think are pretty good, but they aren't the ones that you're excited to build. You build these most of the time because your champion needs to build it or because you get into the late game and you can use a Void Staff as your third or fourth item. Luden's Echo is pretty good. I think this patch actually did help it, and it will become more popular because now it does have mana, so it feels less bad to sink money into this item for the passive because you're already going to have enough mana to survive. So this could actually become a first item on a lot of champions, but I'm not sure it's as good as the other options for first items. Lich Bane, like I said, champion specific. Void Staff's a good item. This is where it gets tough because these are the items that if you didn't know which champions existed in League of Legends and you looked just at the items, these are the items that people should be drawn to. I think that Seraph's Embrace, personally, I think Seraph's Embrace is the best AP item in the game between a bunch of different factors. I think the fact that you get 140% value once it transforms, it's guaranteed to transform as long as your team doesn't lose before the 20-minute mark. And once it hits that point where you get the shield, the item just goes out of control. It's such a good item. Same thing with Nashor's Tooth. If there were more champions where it felt good to have attack speed and AP, then everyone would be using a Nashor's Tooth. And I think whenever somebody figures out new champions that can use Nashor's Tooth, it's going to be very good, or at least very popular. And I think it's already a very good item. Deathcap, even better after the change. Morellonomicon, I'm not sure if this is going to be a tier 1 or tier 2. Probably should be tier 2 because the Grievous Wounds is very good in basically every single game. But I think that it's not as good of an item as it used to be. So I think that's probably a tier 2 item now. The Liandry's change is like a very serious buff. But it might not be that popular because a lot of players already know which champions they want to play or they have played. So maybe this is probably a step below these. I think Rod of Ages is just a great item. It's a great item, and whether or not people play it the item itself is just very, very strong. The fact that it has to scale a little bit doesn't really matter as much as it used to, because it used to be a lot worse when you had to initially buy it. And then Spellbinder. The reason I think I want to leave Spellbinder in the second tier is because the active is so good that I think it's going to become very popular and people are going to want to try to figure it out right away how to use it. And since it can't be built as a first item, I think we should probably penalize it a little bit. But the same thing could be said for Deathcap. I mean, really, yeah, maybe Deathcap should be down here, but Deathcap's definitely better than these items. Just in terms of how much it unleashes the rest of your kit. Yeah, so I mean, I think these Seraph's Embrace, Nashor's Tooth, and Rod of Ages, I think if people made their decisions on which champions are going to play based off of items, I think it would be champions who can use Seraph's Embrace, Nashor's Tooth, and Rod of Ages efficiently as first items. Because you're getting so much value out of that, and having that as your foundation for the rest of your core is just perfect. It's a perfect way to go into a game. But I don't think that's ever going to happen, unfortunately. I think players want to build other things, and I'm not sure why. But that's all I have for you today. So thanks for watching. Let me know what you think the best item in League of Legends is for AP, or just the best item that you think in general. And let me know if you disagree with me, because I think this is a good starting point for a tier list. It's definitely not a definitive tier list, or like this is my first attempt at making one, so it's not really tried and tested and stuff like that. But I'm pretty comfortable with how this turned out. So until next time, thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe.